Again, welcome everyone to this webinar, Going with the Workflow, how Goettsch Partners uses Ideate Software to streamline Revit. And we are just so thrilled to have Nickolas Popoutsis here that's going to present just some of the workflows and some of the ways that they use Ideate Software. And Goettsch Partners is an architecture firm with a global perspective. They're based in Chicago, but they have additional offices in Denver and Shanghai, and they share a singular approach to design that combines seasoned experience with a passion for exploration and innovation. They have completed and have active projects in all five continents, or I should say in 5 continents, probably not Antarctica, and represent a diverse range of types and sizes. So I am just thrilled to have Nick here with us today, and I really appreciate the fact that he stepped up and was willing to do this presentation. So with that, I'm going to switch it over to Nick, and I'm going to turn off my camera. But I'm here to answer questions.
I'll do the same. I'm going to turn off my camera just so that we can focus on the presentation, but welcome everyone. Thank you for your time. And thanks, Richard, for the introduction. Really excited to be here today. So as Richard alluded to, we do work all over the world. We specialize in high-rise office and mixed-use buildings, but we do a variety of other types of building typologies as well. This is just kind of a broad portfolio of some of our projects throughout the world, many of these which I've touched on or been greatly involved with. A little bit about myself. I'm a graduate of both University of Milwaukee and Cincinnati. I'm a designer here at GP, and my work experience includes prominent office projects in US, China, and the UAE. So as a designer, I work with all team members to develop design schemes from initial concept through construction documents, and I'm involved with the teams on a day-to-day basis. So with my role in the firm, I just want to iterate the fact that I'm usually involved from initial concept through construction documents. So I have a great care and passion for how our sets are put together. You know, our architectural sets are really the tool for how a building is to be built and designed. And it's what we work with every day. And Ideate has some great software tools to help make the workflow a little bit easier and reduce some of the repetitive, daunting tasks. So today's inspiration and mantra, a couple of quotes here for you. I always love this one: work smarter, not harder. And then also, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So with working smarter, let's be smart with our time. I would rather focus on design work rather than renaming views in Revit. You know, the work that takes us away from our thought process of design is not time well spent. And so that's the smarter component. Simplicity here, all the tools I'm going to show you today are very simple to use. You don't need to have any great Revit knowledge, just some basics about how to manipulate views, view templates, things like that. But nothing here is complicated. Let's keep it simple and just focus on what we're all here to do as architects or designers. So today's goals, let's get efficient here. First off, we're going to show how to easily leverage the power of Excel. We're going to use Ideate's Sticky, which is one of their apps that allows you to link Word documents, Excel files, PDFs into your Revit file. The great thing about this, I'm going to talk mostly about the use of Excel. I'm going to show you some real-world applications of it, how we're using it. But using Excel, it's great. The formatting is great. We know how to get it to look the way we want to for graphic quality. But it's also ubiquitous. Everybody knows Excel to a certain extent, some more than others, but it's very accessible. And then also you can use the power of keeping your data centralized. You can use complex formulas, linking across different tabs, and using just a single source input for all of your information so that you eliminate redundancy and the ability to miss updates. If you're updating in multiple spots, that's where you have room for error. So we try to eliminate that and have a single source. And then the second half will be more about sheet setup and automated tasks. This will be just about getting your sheets set up from initial concept That's not to say the tools aren't still applicable throughout the process, but this is a quick way to get your set up and running in maybe like a schematic design set, for example. So we'll use Ideate Sheet Manager and Ideate View Creator to set up some drawings to get them up and running in a clear, organized way. Later on, we'll use Ideate Align. That's a tool that is used to help coordinate your set and create a very good way of doing a QA/QC process, which I'll explain that a little bit later and why it's so important to give a little bit of thought about your sheet setup and how your set's put together. And then lastly, we'll use Ideate Clone, which is a way that we use to quickly create design alternatives without having to kind of reinvent the wheel and relay out sheets. It's a very easy tool to iterate on a design, which we often do. Okay, first off, we're going to talk about Ideate Sticky. Some practical uses for Sticky. So this is the toolbar in your Revit window. So Sticky is the button right here. What we're going to do here is some Excel examples that I'm linked into an actual project. One is using Excel to organize abbreviations, something that's standard on a sheet, and when you edit it, you can automatically sort by alphabetical order, so you're not having to go through and really work around. It's just let the computer do the work for you. We use it for our material legends, for tracking our material finishes and the changes that are made throughout a project. And then we also use it for a summary of our project metrics. So I'll show you real examples of all of these. So let's start with the alphabetical list. As I mentioned, on our G series sheets, which are general notes, we always have a list of abbreviations, which you can see over on the left. If I enlarge this a little bit, I formatted this in Excel and linked it in with Sticky. And then I created a sort column so that I can just add any of these to my document. This was done the old-fashioned way in Revit, and it was just painstaking because we wanted the text to align a certain way, and inserting one just like knocked things out of a line. But this was very easy to maintain, and if changes were made, it's just easily updated, and then you can just grab this Excel sheet and just link it into the next project and so forth to keep moving forward. So like I said, nothing here that we explained today is very overly complicated, but are extremely effective and useful. Here's another one, is our material legends. This is one of our sheets where we have information listed here. This again is an Excel sheet that is linked in. And you can see some of the changes that I've made. Some practical uses too that I've used with Excel is just being able to highlight cells. So I just blew up like our metal finishes here, for example. And the classic way to cloud changes, since like a GMP set, for instance, is to use a cloud bubble. When you have small text boxes like this, it's very difficult to cloud changes for very small things like this. So there are instances where the clouds become obstructive and they obstruct the information in a set and it's not legible. So what we've elected to do is just highlight the cells that have changed, and we have a note and we cloud the note that the yellow highlights are indicative of the revisions. So it's an easy way for the general contractor to review the information without clouding up anything else. They won't have to go to a previous set to see the information that hasn't changed. And it's just a way to effectively communicate. So I'm just going to quickly scroll through here through a variety of changes that happen throughout our set. You can see some are like 1 or 2 changes, some are more, and the Excel chart just kind of lives and grows with the project. The last use of Ideate Sticky that I'm going to go through here is the project metrics and summary of program. So this is a screenshot of our Excel file. As you can see on the bottom, there are a number of tabs here. And this is all information relevant to our project. We have transparency analysis, we have build to analysis, we have open area, parking counts, everything. And we also have to have a summary of this information. So rather than entering the information multiple times, we can just link it from these other tables to just have that single source input. So on the right here is our sheet layout. So these, I've highlighted all the areas where we're using Ideate Sticky, and it's all related back to this Excel chart here. So site information, which is this table here that's shown on the left, is linked in here, and this is how it looks on the sheet. Our sheet index is tagged from there, parking counts, build to analysis, open office space or open space on the site, transparency analysis, and real quickly before I get into this, I'm just going to show you how easy it is to use this Ideate Sticky tool. This is the sheet that I was referencing here. And what I'm going to do here is go to my Excel sheet. I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. One moment. Here's my material legend. Apologies, I'm having difficulty opening. Here we go. Okay, as you can see here, this is our material legend. There's a couple ways to link in the file. So I'm going to go back to my file here. I'm going to run sticky. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new sticky. So I'm going to select my source. I'm going to select my material legend. And you can give it a name, which is the name that's identified here. So I'm going to name it Material Legend Demo. So here's the link. And now if I close out of this, it linked in my Excel sheet. I'm going to move this over. I can snap to the corners and I can get it placed nicely here. And there's just a duplicate of the material legend there. Now, if I make a change, I'm just going to go back to my Excel sheet and I'm just going to do this. Sorry, if I go print. Go here, I'm going to highlight these cells and I'll just do a simple bucket fill. I'm going to save. I'll close out of it. I'll run sticky again. It's going to analyze all of the links. You'll notice here the status says out of date. So all I do is click on this and I'll say update. Now if I close out of this, the cells are highlighted. So it's just as simple as editing an Excel sheet and then relinking. It tells you if it's out of date and very simple to use. So that's all I have for today on Ideate. Richard, are there any questions that have come up?
Yeah, there are a couple questions. Basically, one of them from Jonathan was that he says, I thought clouds were contractually necessary on revisions. So that's kind of a good question. Is that something that you've had to negotiate, or is that a contract, meaning that at physical, like you said, clouds as opposed to highlighting the information? I guess you did go back and you did put a cloud and say this is
Yeah,
my situation.
exactly. So I think that's kind of the workaround that we've come up to. So we cloud a note, which indicates something on the drawing that's changed. So I guess maybe it's a technicality, but it's a very good question. There could be other formatting opportunities where you could space out your lines, but I've not come up with any conflicts with that or anyone having any issues with how we've done this workflow.
Okay. And another good question that came in is, where is this Excel information stored? Is it on a network drive, or is it on the desktop connector, or how do you go about doing that?
Sure. Great question. Ultimately, the file lives on our network with our project, and that's the file that you link in. It could be on Autodesk desktop connector if you wanted to, but we actually keep the live file in our Microsoft Teams project, and that way it's a shared document. All team members have access to it. They can get into it at the same time, and you can see the edits live. And then when we're ready to issue, we always save it down and override the folder on the network. But that just gives a little bit more access for the entire team.
Yeah, and Mariana has a good question too, kind of as similar, is about like, are we supporting SharePoint? So I'll answer that on the behalf of Ideate Software. We are not officially supporting SharePoint because SharePoint doesn't work the same way as, let's say, Dropbox, or BIM 360 with the desktop connector where it's keeping things up to date. You have to sort of log in to SharePoint. So we do have a couple workarounds on our website, but I'm just going to say right now, officially, we're not supporting SharePoint, but we've certainly been asked that quite a bit. But we are supporting BIM 360 or the Autodesk Construction Cloud via the desktop connector or Dropbox or other kind of file sharing services like that. And then maybe one last question. This was a good one from Jonathan. So Nick, he was saying, or he asked, like, did you have to modify any of your company standards to use Ideate Sticky, or basically just use the Excel the way that your company standards are? Meaning that did Ideate Sticky force you to make any changes?
I see. Actually, it liberated us a little bit. It forced the change because we had the ability to link in Excel. We reconsidered the way that we did our material legends, for example, and it's changed the workflow. I mean, a lot of this would have just been information that's just dumb data that is just manually inputted on our sheets if we needed to. So this just got us the ability to get a little bit more intelligent and organized.
Excellent. Well, I think that's the most, or I should say the the majority of the questions. So if you'd like to move on to Ideate Apps,
Sure.
that would be fantastic.
Great. All right, so next we're going to get into Sheet Manager, Ideate Sheet Manager. The toolbar is highlighted here. So as I mentioned before, the component of this I'm going to focus on more is about initial setup, getting a working set for, especially for a high-rise building with multiple floors, up and running quickly. So we're going to talk about using creating views and batch renaming to help stay organized. Later on, we're going to use the Align Views tool, and that's going to help us with some of our QA/QC and keeping a clean organization of our drawings. And then we'll finally end with clone views for design options or creating similar views. So I'm going to go back to my project here, and I'm going to do a little bit of a live demo. Just a disclaimer, what I want everyone to take away from this is just how to use this. It's not necessarily a step-by-step of the entire process or necessarily all of the tools. So some things I will kind of speed over a little bit just for the interest of time. So if we come up here, I'm on my Ideate Software tab. I will come to my Sheet Manager. And this project is one that's under construction already, so it's fairly developed, but I'm going to take the approach that it is a brand new project. I'm working into the assumption that I've set up all my levels, I've created views based off my levels for all my plans, and I'm going to set up all of my typical sheets. So let's go here. So I am going to go to my level plans, which are levels, like I'll just do 9 through 18. I could do all of these, but again, I just want to do this in the expediency of time. A little bit about the Sheet Manager dialog here. So the dialog here, it clearly says is views on the left, sheets on the right. What I can do is it allows me to interact between views and sheets. I can drag and drop views to quickly populate sheets. I can create new sheets from here so that it adds to them. I can also look for views that maybe aren't necessarily already in the set, so it filters it out, or I can look at all views in the entire project. So let me highlight these again. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do View Creator, and it's going to open up a new dialog box. So it's reading all of the rules. And there's several different options here, but what I'm going to talk about today is duplicate views. So I'm going to hit next. Now, obviously, just like duplicating a view in Revit, you can choose to duplicate the view and eliminate any drafting or annotations. You can duplicate with detailing or as a dependent, or if, say, you wanted to make an RCP out of a floor plan, you can change the family type, but keep the view type exactly the same. So you can switch how it's being worked on. Since I'm using this as kind of a blank slate, I'm just going to do duplicate without any of the annotation or drafted lines. So I'm going to hit duplicate, and then this dialog box will come up. It populates all the sheets, and then there are some view rules here. These are rules that you can set up yourself. There's a number of them that are right out of the box from Ideate that are very helpful and robust, and you can use those as a starting point to edit to your needs. So I'm going to go to this demo one with view template. If I click the ellipses, it'll just show all of the different types, and I'm going to go in and edit this one. And some of the parameters that I've done here, you can have a naming convention. So I can put a constant. So this is set up from when I was doing some key plan geometry before. So it has the prefix, the view name that is currently listed, so like level 9, and then a suffix at the end. So for I'm going to demonstrate how you can also batch rename later. So I'm going to leave this as is for this demonstration, and I'll change the names later, but I could do that up front if I wanted to. Some other options that I'm checking here is you can set like a number of things like a scope box definition, a view scale, a lot of different parameters, but I'm going to let my view template take care of a majority of these. So I have this to prompt. You could also just specify exactly what view template you want it to be, but I like to do the prompt. It's a little bit more robust so that every time I run it, I can specify what I want it to be. And I don't have to make a new rule for each type of plan that I'm running. And then I'm also going to check scope box so that all of these views will be cropped in the same manner. All right, so I'm going to go back here. And then here are the prompts that are showing up now that I selected. So my view template. So I have a demoed view template here, and these I know are all my tower plans. So that's the scope box I'm applying, and then here's the view template. And then here are all of the views that are going to be created. And as I noted before, there was the prefix and the suffix. I can batch rename these right here. So I'm just going to say find NP. Oops. Find NP, and I'm going to replace it with a space. So that eliminated it here, and then I'm going to find and then the key plan geometry, and I'm going to do that here. And then now you'll see the yield sign saying that these are going to be duplicate views. As you know, with Revit, you can't have any views named exactly the same. So I'm just going to give it a prefix of demo, and then I'll hit append. And now my names are, or my views are named. And now it's saying that they're done. If I wanted to create another batch of this, I could do it again and have them all named something different here. But in this instance, I'm just going to let this think for a moment, duplicate the views. I have them under this demo category, and here they are right here. They all have the scope box that I applied and the view template. So these all just showed up, and this was a new category that was added. Let's see here. Oh, so just one other item to mention about this. You know, if you go back to your sheet name, and that rename tool is very, very powerful. Say I decided demo was not the appropriate name, I can always right-click on this and do rename, and that same dialog box will come up, and I can run this again if I want to have a new standard for my view organization. So very, very powerful tool for that as well. Go back to my PowerPoint here. So I'm also going to get into setting up a sheet now. So what I'll do is go back to my sheet manager here, and I'm going to create a sheet here. I'm just going to duplicate one of these. I'm going to clone this sheet, and it brings up another dialog box here. And so it's asking me what the new sheet number is going to be. And so I'll just say it's going to be, oops, demo A209 for my 9th floor plan. And I can change the name of it. And then what I want to do is I want to pull from these demo plans that I have. So I can say demo level 9, And I didn't duplicate the core plans. There's 2 plans on the sheet, but I'm just going to go ahead and stick with that. So this is going to create a new one. So I'll just run clone, and it's going to create another sheet exactly the same as how I had already set up that first sheet, and just swap out the new sheet on it. So it didn't put in a large core plan on it because I said none, but I can always go back and add that later. So here's the original one, and then there's the new one. So what I do then is I can do that same process, and I can methodically go through all of my floors and just swap out and add in based off of just creating one sheet layout. All the rest of my subsequent sheets are going to be exactly the same location, orientation, and placement on the sheet. So pretty powerful tools to quickly populate your set. I'm going to go to the Align tool next, Richard, but are there any questions that came up about Sheet Manager and view creation?
Not specifically. There several people had mentioned that there, there are lots of other third-party Revit tools that do some of these things, which I admit. But I said I think our tools do them better. Of course, maybe I'm biased. But yeah, nothing. Oh, this is not really related to the sheet and view tools, but it has come up a couple times. Are you using Bluebeam? I know a couple people have asked if they saw that in your, I think, the taskbar.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
and so I mentioned public, or I think that when I answered the question, Ideate Automation, which is one of our products, does publish to PDF, but there's not a lot of, I think, overlap between Bluebeam and Ideate Software Solutions. Would you say that's a fair statement, Nick?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, they both have, I think, very specific workflows, right? That are important. So, okay, yeah. Well, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let me go here. Okay, so next we're going to move to our Align tool. You probably noticed it right next to the Sheet Manager. And the way that our office uses this is just for a sheet organization. As I mentioned, we want everything to be aligned. I personally use this for a great QA/QC check. After I've compiled my whole set before an issuance, I like to just quickly flip through the set, scroll through all the plans, and make sure everything's aligning. Shafts are aligned, columns are aligned. If a column transfer is moving, I can track it across plans. It's very much similar to kind of like a spot the difference exercise that kids often do. A side-by-side comparison is great. It takes a little bit of time. I don't know if anybody's found all 5 right now, but I'll just highlight them quickly. So it takes about 20-30 seconds to kind of analyze this. All works pretty well. So what if we utilized technology to help us out a little bit? So what took 20 to 30 seconds, if we used a computer and overlaid the 2 with different colors, we could quickly identify within an instant what is different. We use the same thing with our PDFs. We use Bluebeam often, and copy and paste in place is a great tool that we use for comparing things from floor to floor, or overlaying MEP or structural trades on our architectural plans. But having things aligned really helps the coordination process, especially when you're working just outside of Revit. So it extends beyond the Revit software and Ideate, but Ideate is the tool or vehicle that helps us to do that. So now imagine if I were to ask you to do the same task again and shook the image all around. I have some examples here where one of our engineers, they just drag and drop a plan onto a sheet. This is one of the sheets from that same project. But if I flip to the next sheet, I start to see this. Plans are jumping all over the page. It's difficult to see what the differences are, what's changed, what's the same. It's just kind of hard to get your focus. Then if you use one of our drawings as an example, this is how our sheets are all laid out. We used Ideate to align all the views. So that's, I'm going to pause here. That was the podium views, and then we have a second layout, which is our typical tower views, where we have an enlarged core in the bottom, and the view on the top. You can see how balconies are moving around. You can see when elevators drop off, columns transfer. But it's just a very clear way for us to quickly go through our building to make sure that it's all laid out accordingly. It helps us to pick up those like minute details. Just seeing a minor shift in something kind of triggers your instinct to question what just happened there. So it's just a good cue for doing a QA/QC check. Oftentimes, like there's an elevator overrun, and maybe all the other elevators through the tower of all typical plans are all adjusted, but you just missed that one floor that was up at the top. It's just a great way to check yourself. So I'm going to talk about Ideate Align here. So if I click on the toolbar at the top and select Align, this is the dialog box that comes up. What you'll need to do first is you'll need to set up one of your sheets exactly the way you want it. So in this instance, for example, we have the 1/8 inch plan on the top and the 1/4 inch enlarged core on the bottom. We have everything fine, and that sheet is open in Revit. The alignment view tool here on the upper left is going to pull from all the views that you have open. So you're saying this is the view you want to align to. And then on the right, it searches for all similar views. So if you have that checked, so it's going to look for all 1/8 inch plans and sheets that have those types of plans on it, so that you can align to it. So I'll select those that range, and then you can select the view that's on the sheet. So since we have 2 views on here, you can select this. You run the align tool; it'll do all the 1/8 inch plans. And then you can select the enlarged core and do all the 1/4 inch plans. The way we do it is we do align plan view using model coordinates. If it doesn't do this, I believe, Richard, it sets it to the origin, but we always do it based on the geometry of the plans, regardless of the orientation of the origin and extents of the view.
That is correct. It will use the centroid of the view. Sometimes
Right.
that can be helpful if you're laying out unit plans, right? Where you you don't always want them to be based on the model geometry. Actually, this was a customer request because at first I think we did always have model geometry or the origin point. But then if you're doing like a big, large layout with either unit or condo plans, you want them arranged based on the centroid of the view.
So yeah, so you would evenly distribute the center lines of like the unit, and that allows the space to kind of flex around it. That makes a lot of sense. And then lastly, we also check the match plan view title position. This is one thing, a pet peeve of mine. There's no way to snap to these necessarily to get the lengths exactly the same. You have to like drag and align, and it's always very painstaking to do it, especially from sheet to sheet. But this way, all of your titles are going to be in the exact same location on your sheets as well. So it's a great way to just kind of get your set all lined up. And like I said, the less things that are shifting around, the less your eye has to focus on, and you can focus on what's really changing in the building. All right. So before we used Ideate, I used to do the same process manually. The only thing that you can grab onto in a view is a reference line, a reference plane, or a grid line. And so what I used to do is I would draft and locate my plans on a sheet with drafting lines, copy and paste this, or maybe make a detail group that I could apply to all the sheets, and then manually drag my views one by one into it. So just a perspective of how I used to align the sheets versus using Ideate, which can do it in a matter of seconds. This has just been a great tool to help us do this. So the process is nothing new. It's exactly what we want to do. This just makes it easier. Again, working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, Nick, I'm sorry to jump in for a question, but this is like just perfect because one of the questions was asked, does Align work with the guide grids or help define them or essentially supplants the use of them? So I think the answer would be basically what you said. It kind of supplants the use of the guide grid.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not to say like, so when I talked about the clone tool, that was working off the assumption I already set up the sheet. So I always do go through this process where I lay out one sheet exactly the way I want it to. You could use the grid to come up with some metrics, but you don't really need to apply it to the other one. So yes, I would agree with you on that.
And then another question, since we're on the Align, Andrew mentioned about like, do you have any issues with like sections or grid bubbles that are way outside the crop region? Or I guess they'd be in the annotative crop, but like in your case, you've got, everything's nicely cropped, but if there is something, he was wondering if that would throw off the alignment. And I guess my answer quickly is it doesn't throw off the alignment, but it might throw off the view where it's
Yes.
located on the sheet.
Well, because it's using model coordinates, your buildings can always be placed unless you uncheck that box that we were just talking
Yeah.
about, because that might throw off the centroid. So if that were the case, yeah, it could shift it all the way over. For our plans, because they're pretty typical, we always use the scope box, so that nicely crops everything in. But say you didn't have a scope box, it would align it correctly on the sheet, but when you print the sheet, it may skew where the center of it is, and some of it will get cropped. So you want to make sure everything is still within the extent of your title block.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on the line? I was just going to pause for a moment. I'll move on to the phone.
Oh, there was one question about, is this kind of a one and done process at Goettsch Partnership, meaning that you align it once, and then what happens if the core shifts, or not the core, I should say, but maybe the whole floor plan or the podium shifts?
Sure. Question. No, this is a tool that we use often. I mean, building designs never stay exactly the same from your initial concept. So your sheet layout may have to adapt. Maybe you need to add another legend, and you have to shift your sheet over a little bit to accommodate that. Just run the align tool again, and you can set up one sheet and then align all the rest of them to that. So it's an ongoing process. If anything needs to change, this is a great way to keep everything in sync.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't have any more questions on a line.
Great. Okay, and then the last tool I'm going to use here is the clone tool. And I mentioned that we use that for doing design studies and iteration. So the tool is located up here. It's a great way to duplicate existing layouts. And I'll just demonstrate this very quickly here. So I'm going to go to my level 10 plan. And I'll use clone. So I have my sheet set up here as I want it, but then I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to duplicate with detailing. Duplicate with detailing. So I'm saying create the view exactly as it is. And I'm going to leave this as current. So I want the same legend to go into there. So these two views will be created, and then I'm going to make this 210 alt, and it's the 10th floor plan. And I'm going to do a suffix and just say alt 1. And so that's going to rename the views right for me. And so I have a little preview here of what it's going to be. So I'm going to hit clone. Just going to think for a moment. It's duplicating both of these views and placing the legend. Should be taking just another second. Almost done. And here's my alternate. So now I'm going to say done. If I wanted to create several more of these, I could just keep going. So I could do alt 1, alt 2, alt 3. And the process is pretty much done here. So I change this, and I would change this, and I could keep going. So here's my alternate sheet. And then what I'm going to do here is in this template, I'm going to apply my demo. And I'm going to apply a filter where I just have some walls that are turned off. So I'm working on this part of the core here. Say my mechanical spaces weren't laying out correctly. So I gave a comment to those walls so I could hide them, and they're just hidden in the view. They're not deleted or anything like that. And then what I'll do is I'll go into my design option here, and under demo, I've done an alternate. So I always create, if I'm doing these design narrations and there's a I'm far along in a project. I don't want to screw up any of my working drawings if we have to publish, so I always make an empty work set and set that as my primary, so there's nothing in it showing up. And then I'll filter out my walls that are changed, and then I'll just turn those off and then turn on my design option here. And my walls are gonna come up here, and here's my alternate layout. So you can look at that versus that, and now I have, oops, that was the wrong plan. Two different layouts. And again, you could just reiterate it. If you don't want to do a whole design option too, sometimes what I'll do with this is I would just duplicate the view, and then I could just do a mask region, and I could draft in these views if I didn't want to do all the modeling, but I could just do a conceptual layout for rooms, just to get a quick concept buy-in. So that is the clone tool. Are there any questions on the clone tool, Richard?
There was one, actually, I was just typing it to Jean. She was saying, like, when you did clone, it incremented the view or not the view number. Is that?
Oh, yes, it does. Yes.
Okay.
By default. So it went to 13. So if I go to,
I guess it's because Revit requires that it be unique.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, so that will keep going through. So if you don't have any plans created, it's a great way. If you start at 1, it will just automatically go to 2, 3, 4, 5, and go sequentially. But like I said, this project is fairly developed, so it does look for that unique name. And it always pulls from what you created last, if that makes any sense. So if you were cloning like a 300 series, it would start from the last 300 series that I did.
And then there's a question, let me see, can clone add to the current parent view, and can it create a whole new parent independent? Yes, I mean, if you show your drop down, like we're under where it says new sheet, you have the ability to say duplicate with detailing, duplicate as a dependent. So those are options, if that's the, I believe that's the question. And like for Jean, I'll have to get back on the, she said that she means the detail number for each view on the sheet.
Oh, let's take a look. The view down here.
Yeah, since you cloned the sheet, she was saying it was 1, 2, and the next one I guess was 3, 4, even though you cloned the sheet.
Oh no, it switched them. So it went 1, 2 versus 2, 1. See, the top one is 1 and then 2.
Okay.
It must just be a sequential order.
Of where that view is placed on the sheet. Yeah,
yeah,
I'll have to,
exactly.
like I said, Gene, that's a good question. I'll research that a little bit more.
Richard, could you not use your Ideate renumber to quickly renumber the sheets?
Oh, absolutely. But I guess if you're yeah, I was just trying to prevent that. But you're great answer. Our Ideate renumber, which is part of Ideate Apps, which is also available, you know, it's in the same collection as the sheet and view tools. You can pretty much renumber anything.
And the frustrating part about that too is to swap out 1 and 2. It's very difficult because I can't temporarily change 2 to 1 because it can't be the same. So I often say like 01, and then I'll change this to 1, and then I'll change this to 2. So the tool is helpful rather than having to rename it 2 or 3 times just to get a 2 number swap.
Right. It does allow it kind of does that swapping in the background, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's most of the questions for clone. I know we're a little bit over, but I mean the information has been so fantastic. So I really appreciate everyone sticking with the webinar. And for those people that are watching the webinar later on, then you get some extra details.
Great. Any other questions? We can go back to any other content, but otherwise that's all we had for today.
Yeah, I believe that was most of the questions that, let me see if there's any that come in. No, just like lots of people saying thank you. It's great. So Nick, thank you so much. I think that and I wanted to reiterate what you said at the very beginning of the presentation, is this was not meant to be like a step-by-step, tutorial about how these products work per se. It's more about how Goettsch Partners uses them on a sort of a daily basis, right? And
Exactly.
uses the workflow. And then if you want to know more about any individual application, there's lots of information on our website. There's lots of videos. We have online help for all of these applications. So if you're not an Ideate Software current customer, I'd encourage you to review that information. In fact, even if you are a current customer, there's a lot of good information with videos and online help. Oh, and you know what? But real quickly, Jean was like, she wrote back, renumber worked great. I didn't think of it. So that was a great suggestion, Nick.
Oh, great. Glad it worked.
Well, with that, Nick, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to your work in Chicago. I'm sure you're very busy, and we will see everyone soon. Oh,
Thanks. It was
and
a pleasure.
maybe even at AU, or we're going to be at Autodesk University. So who knows? I might run into some of you at AU.